Hey everyone, ELD here, catching up with these Double Masters spoilers. And before we jump in, just a reminder that I am finally taking pre-orders on this. You can pre-order on ELD's timeballgames.com, link in the description, and they are very limited. I was able to get a decent allocation this time, certainly in comparison to Jumpstart, but I expect these to go fast. So if you do want to support the channel, you can go ahead and place your pre-orders there for VIP or booster boxes are currently listed. We'll get the booster packs and maybe some, I guess that's the only other option. So let's jump right in here. Well of Ideas, a commander card for 6 mana. When it enters the battlefield, you draw 2, and at the beginning of each other player's draw step, they draw an additional card, and at the beginning of your draw step, you draw 2 additional cards. This is essentially Howling Mine, just ratcheted way up. Of course, the mana cost is ratcheted as well, so more of a card that'll only see play in Commander for the most part. Very good for group hug style decks, which are a pretty reasonable thing to have in your Commander's arsenal. If you're going to have a bunch of decks, nothing wrong after perhaps you spike a whole table to then turn around and play something that shows some love for everybody. Frixion Revoker. This is a eternal playable card, vintage, legacy, you name it. This shuts down a variety of nasty activated abilities, and he's a little fragile. The 2/1 is not the biggest of creatures, but this guy does see a decent amount of play alongside accelerants like City of Traders, Ancient Tomb, and even Mishra's Workshop. This is not embarrassing to cast off of that at all, as it can stop potentially your opponent's only outs. In Vintage, it's particularly nasty as it can come down and stop your opponent's mana base, even if you're not sure what they're doing. If they have a Mox Jet or Sapphire or something like that lying around, Revoker can come down and deny them their mana. The only downside, which is fair, is that it doesn't stop land, so no go on stopping Bazaar of Baghdad, making Pithing Needle often a more popular choice in sideboards, unless you also have an aggressive element like the Workshop decks do. Spellskite. I'm surprised by this reprinting. This card has been reprinted already, and I don't know how good it'll be in Limited. It's 2 casting costs, 0/4 body, and wreaks havoc with targeted abilities. Similar to the Flag Bearers from the Apocalypse cycle, this is kind of a more accessible version, and you can just pay 2 life or a blue to change the target of a spell or ability to Spellskite. Adaptive Automaton. This was reprinted in Explorers of Ixalan, the box set, as was Path to Exile. So I actually have probably 200 of those opened. So I'm not personally thrilled with this reprint. It's probably going to take a little bit off of my bottom line. But Commander players will be happy to get it. And it's fine. That's just part of the business. You got to expect that Wizards are going to be reprinting these cards, and hopefully it's going to be offset by selling the booster boxes, but it is a big hit for stores that have significant inventories in singles when some of these reprints come through, and ideally it is offset by the sales of the new product and of course the new business from people trading cards, which I'm really hoping to get a lot of that. Obviously, we want to be selling a ton of booster boxes, getting that out there, but I'm also hoping that people are going to be coming in and it's going to be a very robust trade economy, and probably more now than ever. I think LGSs can serve as that hub. When you're not out there meeting as many players, if your store is able, as we are here, to always be buying any and all Magic cards, that is a really valuable service right now when you can't just as easily pop in at an F&M and do all sorts of trades to turn your unwanted cards into the ones that you actually would rather have. Endless Atlas. Must be a Commander printing, I think. It looks like something from the Ixalan block. Let me know where this was originally from. I kind of like this card, oddly enough. 2 casting costs, and you can pay 2 and tap it to draw a card if you control 3 or more lands with the same name. I would have played the heck out of this back in the day. The fact that you can have 3 basic islands and have a JM Day Tome that cost half as much. This card's actually pretty sweet, and I'm kind of surprised I hadn't heard of it before. I guess we're just at a stage where just a mono blue control deck, not really a thing anymore, but that used to be a severe menace in Vintage previously. And this type of incremental advantage is not currently in vogue. We do have some cheaper ways of doing it. Something like Mystic Remora, for example, can probably yield a lot more cards. But, I mean, I'd probably play this in a kind of control-ish commander deck just to have that feel of an old-school control deck, just kind of grinding out building advantage over the turns and also having good use for your mana. If you do keep that counterspell mana up, having something to sink it into during that final end step before your untap is always nice. Throne of Geth. Too late, guys. Way too late. This card was super hot for just a little while after Death's Shadow became a popular legacy deck again. So, Death's Shadow currently is a black-blue menace. But prior to that, it had Deathrite Shaman, it had Gataxian Probe, and it felt like with those two cards gone, it would just be unplayable. I mean, you're talking about 8 of the main deck cards gone, and really, really good ones, too. I mean, we're talking vintage playable cards stripped from the deck. You'd have to imagine it would be just unplayable after that. Instead, Death Shadow actually ended up being even better in the metagame, and Throne of Geth, for a short while, was an answer to Chalice of the Void. The deck was very short on 2-drops, and Throne of Geth would actually take that Chalice at 1, which was a huge problem, turn it into a Chalice at 2, and actually shut off your opponent's future Chalices at 1. So it was a beautiful piece of tech. Ratchet Bomb eventually, or Powder Keg, became more popular than it, and it was a fun little time in Magic to see such unique sideboard tech having such a powerful impact. The card spiked to like at least $5. I think I may have seen some traded it out at 10 at one point, and then crashed way back down eventually, and now is probably just going to be draft leave-ins at this point, I'd imagine. Ooh, wrong direction. Darksteel Citadel. Been reprinted a ton. It sees a bunch of play in Pauper, and it's fine. I mean, it doesn't tap for colored mana, but it is indestructible. It is a card that is very good at what it does, which is just tap for colorless mana and be difficult to deal with. It also gives you Metalcraft very well, and has general synergy with artifact strategies. So we'll see if there's enough stuff in this limited format to make this an exciting card, and we'll see if the other artifact lands make it in. Pentad Prism, Sunburst. This actually sees some play in not Ad Nauseam, the Frixion Unlife deck. I think it. I mean, it does have Ad Nauseam in it. It's a modern deck that I've actually played, and it uses Angel's Grace. I borrowed it, as you can tell. I haven't played it very much. But Pentad Prism is part of it and allows you to eventually cast your, at the time, Laboratory Maniac. Now it would be Thassa's Oracle. And it's seen play in general in a bunch of different combo decks and is totally fine for Commander, giving you some nice acceleration. Not potentially as good as a Talisman over the long haul, but if you're looking for a short burst of mana, this is like a delayed Dark Ritual. Treasure Keeper. I'm going to have to read this one. A 4-casting cost 3/3. When it dies, reveal cards from the top of your library until you reveal a non-land card with a converted mana cost 3 or less. You may cast that card without paying its mana cost. Put all revealed cards not cast on the bottom of your library in a random order. So basically, when it dies, you cascade. I don't know if I'm misinterpreting that, but that looks like what that is. So that seems totally fine for limited. I'd certainly be happy to turn my 3/3 into a Sword of Fire and Ice or something along those lines. Usually not going to play too much trash in a limited deck, so not going to have like garbage 1/1s or anything like that, or smaller creatures. Usually my curve starts at 2, so kind of worst case scenario, you're getting there. Possible that you'd build a deck that actually has a terrible mana curve to always get a Sword of Fire and Ice or something, but I mean, your 2 slots pretty important. It's almost certainly going to be the type of thing where you just get extra value and not are able to tutor up a specific card. Salvage Titan. Got to have some really bad bulk rares in there that are going to hurt your feelings. Really interesting and limited, though, so I think it may be a justifiable inclusion. The fact that you can cast this by sacrificing 3 artifacts. means that you can get this out really fast alongside with things like, as we've seen, Darksteel Citadel, Pentad Prism, and then exiling artifacts from your graveyard to return it to your hand gives this some inevitability, I guess we can call it. This guy is going to be totally reasonable in the artifact decks. You'll be happy to have him if you're playing for prizes, but if you're just keeping what you opened, you're not going to be too thrilled with this guy. Aethersworn Canonist, another eternal playable card and a potentially unpleasant card to play against. It does shut off a lot of the more fun things you can be doing in the game, but that is Magic. Your opponent's going to try and look at fun as a zero-sum thing where they take away yours so they can have some of their own. And this one is a powerful card, not really going to be very good in Limited, but definitely great in kind of better depending on how busted the format is. The more busted the format, the better Aethersworn Canonist is. This would be land tax. Land tax. Trying to remember what printing had this art. Or maybe this is new art. But it is definitely land tax. And that is actually one of the least fun cards in the history of Magic. I think it was actually banned in Legacy for a while because they just really didn't like the idea of it being the right play. I think that's actually the case. I'll have to look back. I might be misremembering it, but I believe land tax was actually banned in Legacy. And the reasoning was that just your opponent not doing anything was a kind of a bad game state. And that's generally the right thing to do against land tax, is to not allow them to start drawing lands. If they go land tax and on the draw and you're on the play, when it comes to your second turn, it's probably incorrect to play your land and cast a 2-drop, as they're going to just get a free Ancestral. They're going to be able to use cards like Brainstorm to convert those lands into more powerful cards, and they can really, really penalize you for continuing to play your lands. So just not a fun card for most. I personally like it, but I'm about as spiky as it gets. And I don't really, I guess I can't even say I'd like it. I just respect it as a way of winning, you know? Like, I don't generally have too much of a strong emotional attachment to the cards. I have a very strong emotional attachment to winning, and that card has definitely allowed you to do that. For example, in Stasis and Vintage, or God forbid, even Old School, kind of goes against the spirit that most people play that format with, but it is ruthlessly effective. A reprint from Commander 2018, I want to say. 2017, maybe. The 4/4 that makes 2/1 tokens and has some tricks to it. There were some missing years of Commander, which just didn't have that high a population, and the reprints were not super high, and they are going after those cards here. We'll see what it does to the original sealed product, and that's about it. I mean, those original sealed decks are worth a bunch, and the singles also have some value. It is somewhat connected, and I mean, for this type of card, people, if they want it, it is nice for them to be able to get it without needing to buy a $200 deck that they might not even need. Dread Return, sacrificing 3 creatures to return 1 is a bargain in Dredge and other combo decks like Cephalid Breakfast, and that would be something. If they put Nomad and Core and Cephalid Illusionist in this set, I mean, I'll be psyched. We'll see if you could possibly find some other way of cobbling together a win there, but that is one of my favorite decks of all time, and the challenge of winning with it is enough to offset the fact that it's not actually the best deck in the format. But I mean, you can win an awful lot of games with it. Manamorphose, a combo enabler that draws a card, gets way better with cost reducers as you start to actually net mana. So when you're talking about things like Gifts Ungiven and Past in Flames, being able to use this with a cost reducer gets out of hand very, very quickly, and is a pretty big hit. I mean, I think this was like $10 or so before the reprint. We'll see. This one will likely be a very good time to pick these up. shortly after release, as I can expect that the value of this is going to be just hard for the market to calculate at first. I think a booster box is right now, like I'm pre-ordering them at $320. I expect that to go up to $350 at some point as the supply dries up. And a lot of that is the rares and mythics. Like, it's tough. Like, even with the rares and mythics, some of them being priced in at like half of their original printing counterparts, still kind of needs to land in a range where those box prices make sense. And a lot of these uncommons are going to be left in the cold in terms of their value, making it a great time to scoop them up. I think it's just difficult in the short term when packs are being opened and these are just flying around all over the place. There's a lot of opportunity there. You know, if you're a casual player, picking up your playset, super good. If you're a backpacker, these type of cards can have some very serious dividends. And if you've got a ton of them now, it's probably a good time to be moving some of them along, as you can expect a dip. Chrome Mox. Let me just take this art in. That is wild. To me, that has a Pinbot feel. This is one of the original pinball games from the 80s that kind of started that whole wave of resurgence with Pac-Man and arcade games becoming a thing. So pinball obviously predates the arcades with monitors. However, there was a resurgence of pinball alongside those original arcade games, and this has a very similar feel to me. And yeah, it's a really interesting piece. I enjoy art that kind of challenges you and makes you want to stop and really try and take it all in. And this one, I think, is probably going to command quite a value. The original Chrome Mox, the German printing here, I think at Mythic will be interesting to see how much it cools off. We really don't know how big a deal it's going to be reprinted at Mythic in this set. So we'll really find out. I mean, that is the big question, guys, is what is the Mythic population going to look like for these cards? How much of those Mythics going to cool off? How many of them are going to go up in value versus down in value? I mean, some of these, if the reprint isn't big enough to meet demand, it doesn't take that long for it to recoup when we're talking about Mythics. Rares are a different story. I mean, there are a lot more of the rares. So typically a rare sheet will be one of each Mythic that's in the set, and then 2 copies of each rare of each set. So if you did buy, in theory, 121 packs of cards and they were perfectly distributed, you would get 1 of each rare and 2 of each Mythic. Now, in this case, there's 2 rare slots, so it'd basically be kind of double. So 24 packs would be 48 cards. So, you know, you'd be somewhere around 60 packs to get your 120 cards. I guess 61 packs should yield you 1 of each Mythic and 1 of each rare. We've got Heartbeat of Spring. And a Discord open in the background there. Heartbeat of Spring. A player taps land for mana. They add 1 mana of any type that land produced. A commander favorite. A card that has done very well over the year. I think it's probably like $6. It kind of crept up from being nothing to just continually moving up as commander players recognize the value of this type of ramp. And of course, as Group Hug became more and more of an archetype and an art form in and of itself of creating a type of deck that just kind of sets everybody else's deck and ratchets it up to 11. Heartbeat of Spring, part of any type of Group Hug deck. Jora Weatherlight Captain. I don't know why I thought she was an uncommon. I thought she was an uncommon in Dominaria. I guess I'm wrong. Whenever you cast a historic spell, draw a card. A 3/3 body for 4. Seems fine for commander. Definitely a powerful effect. And artifacts are some of the best cards in the game. So nothing really too much to say there. I think he was from Dominaria. Maybe I'm just thinking of the different card. Let me know in the comments. Disciple of the Vault. Absolutely brutal card. This guy when he was in Standard, enabled Standard decks to literally hang with Vintage decks. This is not hyperbole. You could take a Standard Mirrodin block era deck with Disciple of the Vault, Arcbound Ravager, Artifact Lands, and things like Cranial Plating and Aether Vial, and that would literally be able to hang in there and beat Vintage decks. It would be a match. There was no joke. That very few times where you could actually take a Standard deck and have it step in to that arena and not just look like an embarrassing pile of cards. And Disciple of the Vault has proven his worth and been banned in multiple formats because of it, as his just impact for 1 mana is massive. Of course, the 1/1 body for 1, fair enough, but artifacts being put into the graveyard, making your opponent lose a life, gives your deck just incredible reach for things like Arcbound Ravager to just do twice as much damage super quickly. Of course, Cranial Plating pulls you in the different direction there. Cranial Plating gives +1/+0 for each artifact. You can pay 2 to swap it to another creature, a combat trick which has ended many matches in response to spot removal just not going the way that people want, and you can equip it for just 1 mana. This is one of the best equipments of all time, and I've actually seen Stoneforge Mystic in Affinity decks in the past being able to search up this or Batterskull, giving you a real decision. I mean, a lot of the time in that deck you would be getting the Cranial Plating, as it was just the more aggressive path to victory and would be the better strategy versus a lot of the field. Really like the art on this one too. It's really dark, and I just generally enjoy this look overall. I think it's a beautifully made card, and thank goodness it didn't get downshifted, because it would blow Pauper right out of the water. Actually, was it originally? Maybe it's just banned in Pauper. Maybe it was printed as a common, but that card in Pauper would be bananas. Braids, Conjurer, Adept. Kind of the goody two-shoes braids compared to the completely psychotic braids that I know and love. 4 mana, 2/2, and basically get a show and tell at the beginning of each player's upkeep just for them. A card that is difficult to break, but again, it can be a group hug card, though usually those decks end up being 5 color, often based around a Feldegriff. However, this braids certainly has a big splashy effect and could be in one of those decks, even though it may not be the commander. And we're back to Well of Ideas. So that's it for this one. Thanks for all of the support on these. You guys seem to be enjoying them, so I am happy to do them. And I'll probably do some type of recap when these spoilers are completely done to talk about my top 10 of various sorts, cards to keep an eye on, reprints that I think are exciting along those lines. Let me know what you'd like to see. What type of top 10 lists are interesting to you for Double Masters? Thanks for watching.